CEO and founder, Jeff Olson.
Damn. Oh, yeah, you're doing it. Yeah, about time. Boom. Okay. You guys are getting the flow over here now. I like that. I like that. Aren't these stories amazing? It's crazy. It's crazy. I am so excited to get to introduce this next gentleman. I really mean this from the bottom of my heart. And actually had dinner with Dr. Jeff Stock and Max Stock, and some of you don't know yet, Eddie Perez. People in Mexico know Eddie Perez. He's gone down there and talked about SIG 1273 to the Mexican audiences, and him and also Max Stock are going to be going with me to Korea next month to talk to the Koreans about, again, I apologize for that Germany story last night, but next month to talk about SIG 1273, but the gentleman's going to come up and speak here as somebody I see personally as somebody that matters in my life, okay? And personally, I think is somebody who, we've become acquaintances. You can sense a friendship evolving, but I actually see a lifetime relationship evolving. And I think just because he's cut from the same cloth we're cut from, quite honestly. And you may have known Dr. Amen, you may not. You see him all the time. He's huge on PBS, okay? He's on there all the time. He's 10 New York Times bestsellers, so a lot of people know who he is. He's a physician by trade, but he's also a double board certified psychiatrist. And he has these clinics called Amen Clinics. There's one in Irvine, California, one up in San Francisco, one in Bellevue, I think Washington, over in Atlanta, Georgia, and New York. And he is the number one person on this earth who has basically scanned brains. I'm not going to tell his stories. He'll tell it to you. It's really dynamic. But scanning brains and seeing what's going on in there. Matter of fact, he's doing the biggest test right now in research with the NFL players. And he's worked with Rick Warren for a few people in Southern California. But Rick Warren's all over the world now. What they call the Daniel Plan, which has lost, I don't know how many millions and millions of pounds of people. And he actually asked him, what's lately happened for you? And he says he comes from Oral Roberts University. And he just won the Lifetime Global Achievement Award from them. And I could go on and on. He's got a lot of accolades. But more important than that is I actually went to him as a patient, okay? I went in there and had my brain scanned. And then you also do all these tests, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of questions, okay, that you go through, literally beyond that, tons of questions. And then you go in and you physically for hours do all this other stuff, that's seeing how everything connects in your brain. And then they have that, all this huge database, the biggest database of brain scans in the world, okay, into this huge database, okay? And they, you might call it just large data. They call it big data, okay? And they have this intelligence, you might call it artificial intelligence, that researches it. And so your brain has been compared to all these other brains against all these data points, which is like thousands of data points from all these people. And so it's billions, if not trillions, of connections, okay? And they can pretty much tell you where your brain's at, okay? And what's going on, what's gone on, but more importantly, where it can go. And then the coolest thing is when I spent about 3 hours sitting on his couch and him just talking to me about, there's your brain, here's what's going on. It was the most amazing thing. I'm a person who works out all the time, and it's so easy to get in the morning, look the morning's always the best time to look in the mirror, because that's when you cut. At night, you're fat, okay? So... you know that feeling? And, boy, I look good at night going, God, what happened? Somebody blew me up like a balloon. And so I've always, you always have the mirror every day. You get out of the shower to see what's going on, okay? But you don't see your brain. There's something like nothing I've ever experienced. If I was going to recommend you guys go to one of his clinics and do it, okay? It's crazy because you see your brain, but more importantly, it becomes real to you. You see it now like a muscle. And I changed a lot of things in my life. And I went back after about 3+ months of following a lot of different things. And here's my brain, what it was and what it could be. And I was already this far, to what the absolute potential my brain could be. It just changed my life completely. It really did. I went through all that before I said to him one day, well, let me tell you what I do. I just really was a patient. And I started talking about what we do here, and I really started Live Happy, and I talked about this stuff, and I talked a little bit about Nerium, and then I dropped the P word, Princeton, and Dr. Stock and those guys, and started that, and that led to conversations, because Dr. Amen sees himself as, and he is, he's not just himself, he is what you would call the #1 brain warrior on this earth. He truly is a person trying to get people to understand that your brain matters. I always said, God, I always knew I had a brain, but I just didn't realize I had a brain. Okay, and since then, Max Stocks flew out to California and stayed at my house, and we've spent the day with Dr. Amen. We've had meetings at our summit about potential things we can do. We were together last night, and there's this beautiful relationship of what's going on with Dr. Amen and the amazing person he is and what he brings to the table and the credibility he has. What's going over there with Max and Jeff Stock and Eddie Prez and them, and what we have here, these incredible brands, and each one has our own IP and awareness, the synergy that's going on. And so with that, I said, you know what? I got this conference coming up. I got a lot of people who'd be great brain warriors. They're connected. They got back offices. They're in social media. They're natural storytellers. And I could see this future evolving. And there's just a neat future in 2016 that's evolving. But I want him to come here and just talk to you guys. Because this guy is just one of the most compelling people I've ever heard. And this talk is going to give to you is much bigger than your brain. It's about your whole spiritual being as a person and how everything's connected. And he's just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful human being first. That's where it all starts, okay? And he's an incredible agent of change. And he really, in my opinion, is going to become an amazing, amazing friend to all of us here at Nerium. So welcome to the stage, our new friend, future great friend, partner here at Nerium, Mr. Dr. Amen, okay? Thank you. Daniel Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. So I hope you feel like that in 20 minutes. So the first thing I want you to do is get out your phone and text your name and email to this number. And the reason for that is I'm going to send you my 111 slides. And I'll send you some more information about us, but I don't want you taking notes. I want you paying attention to me. Because if you do, I promise you, I'll change your life. No one cares about their brain. Isn't that crazy? Because you can't see it. You can see the wrinkles on your skin or the fat around your belly, and you can do something when you're unhappy with it. But because virtually no one ever looks at their brain, no one knows that it could be in trouble. And it could be in trouble, but you could do something about it. But if you don't know, you don't do anything. So, let me start this part of the story in 2010. It's August 2010. I had just finished my second book on the connection between physical health and mental health. As Jess said, I'm a psychiatrist. And I was so excited because I'd finished the book. I looked to my wife, Tana, and I said, let's go to church. And so we grabbed our daughter, Chloe, who at the time was 6, and we went to a church near our home in Newport Beach. And I said, Tana, why don't you drop Chloe off at Children's Church? I'll go save us seats. And as I walked toward the sanctuary, I saw hundreds of donuts for sale for charity. Now, I've been going to church since I was 3 years old. The donuts have always been there, but today they pissed me off. And then right around the corner was bacon and sausage cooking on the grill. And I'm like, really? And as I walked into the sanctuary, they were cooking hundreds of hot dogs for after church. And so I'm walking in and I'm not in a spiritual frame of mind. I'm irritated. And then as I sat down, the minister started talking about the ice cream festival they had the night before. And now I'm crazy mad. And my wife finds me in church, and she found me typing on my phone. And she gave me that look that only your wife can give you. You're going to hell. Don't you know you're going to hell? Put that thing away. And so I showed her what I was typing. Go to church and get donuts, bacon, sausage, hot dogs, and ice cream. They have no idea they are sending people to heaven early. Save them, then kill them. This is not the plan. And so you'll find I'm a very passionate person, and I'm furious. And I said a prayer that day in church. I have no idea what the pastor said, not one. I prayed that God would use me to change the culture of food at church. And I'm thinking to myself, that is just the dumbest prayer. Why would a psychiatrist who spends his day looking at people's brains be praying for that? Because I love you. I care about you. Food is medicine or food is poison. And no lie, 2 weeks later, I got a call from Rick Warren. So some of you might know Pastor Warren. He's the author of The Purpose-Driven Life, our generation's best-selling nonfiction book. 36 million copies worldwide. And he's the senior pastor at Saddleback Church. They have 12 campuses around the world. And he's like, Dr. Amen, I'm fat. My church is fat. Will you help me? And I'm like, oh my God, God was paying attention. I mean, have you ever prayed something and you were really serious and then something incredible happened? And so I'm on the phone with him and I'm like, you had me from hello? I mean, what are you going to say at that point? I'm busy? So together with my friend Mark Hyman and Mehmet Oz, we created a program for Saddleback called the Daniel Plan. It's not named after me, although I don't always correct people when they ask me that question. It's named after the prophet in the Old Testament who wouldn't eat the king's bad food. And he said, just test me. 10 days. Let me drink water and eat vegetables and see if I'm not as healthy as the other ones. And in fact, he was healthier. And it's really a great story, great opening to the book of Daniel. So what we did is it's based on 5 pillars. Faith, which is why do you care? And I'm going to finish my talk today with why do you care? And I'm going to tell you why I care. But you have to know the answer to that question. Why are you on the planet? What is your deepest sense of meaning and purpose? Because if you don't know, you won't be well. You have to know why you're here. I know why I'm here. I want you to know that too. And then it was food, because food is medicine or it's poison. It's fitness. I mean, one of really the fastest ways to get healthy is start walking. Head-to-head studies. Walking like you're late, 45 minutes, 4 to 5 times a week, is equally effective to antidepressant medication for major depression. And there's no side effects, right? At the end of 12 weeks of an antidepressant, you may be feeling better. You may, in fact, be feeling worse. But they often decrease your libido and your ability to have an orgasm. And I think that's a bad thing. At the end of 12 weeks of walking, you're actually sexier. Focus, that's the part I wrote. It's about brain health and not believing every stupid thought you have. We'll talk about that. And friends, we get better together, or we get sick together. Do you know, they've done these really amazing longevity studies, that the quality of your friendships and their health determine your longevity. So if you hang out with sick people, you are likely to die earlier. So I always say, if you really want to get healthy, find the healthiest person you can stand and then spend as much time around him or her as possible. But this talk is called the Brain Warriors Way because I want to recruit millions of brain warriors. People who are serious about their health. I'm a huge fan of EHT, and you'll find out why. But EHT with a lousy lifestyle is not nearly as effective as if you put the right habits in your life. So you have to ask yourself, do I just want to make money or do I want to change lives? And I'm a huge fan of both for you. All right, so we launched this program. It was January 15th, 2011. The first week, 15,000 people signed up. I'm like, this is going to be fun. The results were spectacular. Let's see. Participants lost over 250,000 pounds the first year. That's as much as the space shuttle. They reported better energy, focus, creativity, sleep, mood, reductions in stress, blood pressure, blood sugar, sexual dysfunction. My wife says, you always have to put that in there, don't you? And they went off many of their medications. This is powerful. But you have to be a warrior. And the reason I use that term is, let's just be really honest with each other. You're in a war for the health of your brain. Everywhere you go, someone is trying to make money by enticing you with bad food that will kill you early. Everywhere you go. I took a first-class plane ticket here. So I'm in first class, and they come by with the nuts. Do you want the nuts? No, thank you. Would you like a drink? No, thank you. Here's this food that's not very healthy. Would you like it? No, thank you. How about ice cream? No. Are you sure you don't want ice cream? No. Are you sure? What part of no are you having trouble with? And then if you just think of the food on the way to the airport, and then when you get to the hotel, I mean, almost everywhere you go, someone is trying, and I didn't say anything about the food around the perimeter here. I didn't say it. I promised myself I won't say it. And these companies hire food scientists to hook your brain to want more of things that hurt you. How is that? Oh, weapons of mass destruction. Food-like substances, highly processed, pesticide sprayed. So why don't you want pesticides on your food? I mean, you obviously don't want bugs on your food. But what you don't know is that you have 100 trillion bugs in your intestinal tract. And they're your friends. They're making neurotransmitters that help your brain work. They help you digest your food. So when you eat pesticide-laden foods, it's killing the good bugs in your body. That's why you don't want foods with pesticides. Interesting, huh? Okay. All right. These same companies, they know how to hook your pleasure centers. So you know in real life, this beautiful woman is never eating this burger. Because she, in fact, would not be a beautiful woman anymore. But if you just think of all the Carl's Jr. commercials, right? So you're connecting sexuality with something that's going to hurt you. They know that. They plan that. Some companies like Open Happiness, I'm like, why don't we tell the truth? Open death, News channels pour toxic images into our minds and make us see fear and disaster around every corner. Jeff actually talks about that we're hardwired for negativity. Well, they know that, and it just gets poured down our minds repeatedly. You have to protect yourself from that. Tech companies create addictive gadgets that hook our attention and distract us from our loved ones. Did you know? So Microsoft did this study. It was so stinking interesting. So 2000, our attention span as human beings was 12 seconds. So they did a recent study that showed our attention span is now 8 seconds, where a goldfish has attention span of 9 seconds. Turn it off. You won't be able to think. You're in a war for the health of your brain and your body. Alzheimer's disease is expected to quadruple by 2050, and there's no cure for it on the horizon. I hate this statistic. 50% of people, 85. So how many of you want to live until you're 85 or beyond? So those of you that didn't raise your hand, suicidal? Think about this. We are living longer than ever. And if you're blessed enough to live until you're 85, you have a 50% risk of losing your mind. That should horrify you. In fact, when you're 20, that should horrify you, because how you prevent Alzheimer's disease is you prevent all the illnesses that are associated with it, and that starts early. One of the truly terrifying things that I learned doing the imaging work I'll tell you about is that Alzheimer's disease actually starts in your brain 30 to 50 years before you have any symptoms. So if you're going to be diagnosed with it at 70, odds are you had changes in your brain, noxious, negative changes in your brain in your 30s or 40s. So this is a woman I diagnosed with Alzheimer's at the age of 59. So these are 2 SPECT scans. That's the study we'll talk about today. SPECT is the study we do at Amen Clinics. It looks at blood flow and activity, looks at how your brain works. The image on the left is a healthy brain, full, even, symmetrical activity. Color doesn't mean anything, it's the shape. The image on the right, you can see all the holes, especially in the back half of the brain. So this 59-year-old woman likely had negative changes in her brain in her 20s. So those of you that are waiting to, think about this, those of you that are waiting to get sick until you get healthy, you might want to rethink that. So I saw that so it doesn't disturb you, they do not die. But you gotta ask yourself, why the hell are they on a railroad bridge and there's no way out? So it reminds me that most of you probably haven't thought about the health of your brain because no one's looked at it. And because we don't look, we don't know. And I don't want you to be that person on the bridge. I want you to get off. And how you get off is you become a brain warrior. You become serious about your health. Because in addition to Alzheimer's, depression is the #1 worldwide most expensive disorder. It is one of the greatest killers of our time. It affects 50 million Americans at some point in their lives. It's increased 400% since the 80s. And the statistic that just horrifies me is 23% of women between the ages of 20 and 60 are taking antidepressant medication. That's nearly a quarter of them. And what most people don't know is that birth control pills deplete serotonin, the don't worry, be happy, feel good chemical in your brain. And depression doubles the risk of Alzheimer's disease in women, and it quadruples the risk in men. Obesity, everybody knows this now. It's a serious national crisis. 2/3 of us are overweight, 1/3 of us are obese. It increases inflammation. It's a risk factor for 30 medical illnesses, including cancer, diabetes, depression, and dementia. And there are dozens of new studies. I published 2 of them that say, pay attention to me. As your weight goes up, the actual physical size and function of your brain goes down. That should scare the fat off anyone. So, I read that first study from the University of Pittsburgh, and I was just horrified by it. In fact, I was so horrified I lost 30 pounds, because I'm never going to purposefully do something to damage my brain, and I was sort of like a little roly-poly. And then I'm on a plane for public television from Chicago to Des Moines, and a very overweight person is in the seat next to me. And I usually don't mind flying on little planes, because when you're little like me, every seat is first class, right? You always have leg room. And but this person was really obese, and half of her body was in my seat. And I got this impulse to reach over and say, you don't want to be a dinosaur. And, you know, because dinosaur is big body, little brain, you're going to become extinct. But I have good frontal lobe function, so I didn't say anything. Because, you know, the next thought in my head was, that is just so rude. Did any of you have mothers like mine? If you don't have something good to say, don't say anything at all. So that was my mom. And but when I got home, I told Tana, I said, you know, I think I'm going to coin this thing called the dinosaur syndrome. And she said, sweetheart, you have enough people that hate you. You don't need more people to hate you. That's rude. And I'm like, okay, so don't say that. That's why married men live longer than non-married men. But then, 2 weeks later, I got invited to GNC. So you know GNC. It's a supplement company in Pittsburgh, and they love my work, and they wanted me to do some things with them. And when I get to GNC, their marketing director, so the number 3 person in the company, is morbidly obese. And it irritated me. Now, pay attention to what I'm going to say. If you don't live the message of your company, if you don't live the message of your life, you are a bad messenger. I don't know how else to say that more clearly. But I have good frontal lobe function. We're going to do business together. And so I'm like, don't say anything, until we got to dinner. And my wife was there. And when I saw Tom order 2 souffles for dessert, I'm like, Tom, you don't want to be a dinosaur. And then out of nowhere, boom, my wife kicks me. Why? Now, for the women that are here, why do you wear pointy shoes? What is the purpose of pointy shoes? It's to torture your husbands when they misbehave. And she gave me that look, that only your wife can give you. But Tom got engaged. He said, what do you mean? He said, I went to the doctor and my cholesterol was fine. I'm like, Tom, there's studies that suggest as your weight goes up, the size and function of your brain goes down. I said, how old are you? He said, I'm 43. I said, well, you're very successful. Are you done? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, you don't want to be the number 2 person or maybe sometime the number 1 person. Or I said, you're sort of like happy with where things are. And if you slip a little cognitively, it's no big deal, right? And he's like, no, that's a big deal. I said, you need to get this under control. And so what did I do? I raised his anxiety. So I'm a psychiatrist. You heard that. In fact, I heard some of you snicker when Jeff said, oh, he's a psychiatrist. Yeah, crazy. Well, I'm going to tell you in a little bit why I became a psychiatrist. But I used to think my job was to lower your anxiety. Right? So I know how to do hypnosis. I know how to do deep breathing exercises, meditation. And about 10 years into being a psychiatrist, I realized that's not my job with everybody. Some people, in fact, need more anxiety. I told you about that longevity study. Another major finding in the longevity study was the people who had low levels of anxiety, the people who were the don't worry, be happy people, that they took unnecessary risks, that they didn't manage their health effectively, died the earliest from accidents and preventable illnesses. So if you feel your anxiety going up, bless me. Send a blessing my way, because I'm doing something that's good for you. So let me finish the story about Tom. So, I got chewed out by my wife, and, how's anybody ever going to love you besides me? A month later, he wrote me that he'd lost 17 pounds. Two years later, he was down 80 pounds. He's the number 2 person where he works. Your brain and your finances are totally connected. Okay. I love this slide. Because when I figured this out, I was like a little kid, so excited. The answer is not to see obesity, depression, and dementia as separate disorders, but rather as different expressions of the same unhealthy lifestyle that have exactly the same cure. If you do the things I talk about, it attacks all three at once. I love that. All right. So the first thing, I'm going to keep this really easy for you. Basically, I want you to remember three things. You have to care. So I call it brain envy. Freud was wrong. Penis envy is not the cause of most of your problems. He was about 2.5 feet too low in the body. It's what's between your ears that matter. I wrote a book once called The Brain in Love. There was a chapter, no forethought equals no foreplay. So that's the brain warrior concept, is you're in a war for the health of your brain. Your brain is the most important organ in your body. It's involved in how you think, how you feel, how you act, how you get along with other people. Your brain is the organ of personality, character, intelligence, and every single decision you make. And when you look at your health, odds are it's a sum of all the decisions that you've made. So if you really want to get healthy, it starts here. It's your brain that pushes you away from the table, or it's your brain that gives you permission to do stupid things. Okay, so care, and then you want to know what are the things that hurt your brain and stop them and do the right things. So I'm going to fill that out for you. Care, stop, do. I mean, how simple is that? Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about me and my journey to being a brain warrior. I am in the middle of 7 children. Growing up, my dad called me a maverick, and to him, that was not a good thing. But I always find myself pushing against the stupidity in the world. In 1972, thank you. So some of you may be as old as I remember the draft. Well, it was a lottery, basically. And my birthday is July 19th, and my number was 19, which meant see you later. And so I went into the military and was trained as an infantry medic. And that's where I became a warrior, but a servant warrior. But about a year into the whole infantry medic thing, I realized I didn't like sleeping in the mud, and I really didn't like being shot at. Some people like that, and we're grateful for them, not for me. And so I got myself retrained as an X-ray technician. And that's where I developed a passion for medical imaging. As our professors used to say, how do you know unless you look? And so I fell in love with medicine, with imaging, and got out of the military on the GI Bill, went to college, and then I got into medical school at Oral Roberts University. And when I was at ORU, as a second-year medical student, someone I cared deeply about tried to kill herself. And I took her to see a wonderful psychiatrist, and I came to realize that if he helped her, which he did, it would not only help her, but it would ultimately help her children and even her future grandchildren as they would be shaped by someone who is happier and more stable. I fell in love with psychiatry because I realized it has the potential to change generations of people. And I have loved it every single day since. And you better believe I'm a brain warrior for the health of my patients' brains, because, I take care of really sick people. We've scanned 90 murderers, I've testified in death penalty trials, suicidal people have been abused. It's a war. But I have to get them to be warriors with me. Otherwise, they'll keep hurting themselves and they won't get well. So I said that. 1991, so this is a real pivotal year for me. I started the first Amen clinic in Northern California. And I went to a lecture on brain SPECT imaging. SPECT is a nuclear medicine study that looks at blood flow and activity. So it's sort of odd for me, who loved imaging. I picked a medical specialty that in fact is the only medical specialty that virtually never looked at the organ they treat. Think about that. Cardiologists look, your neurologists look, your gastroenterologists look, every other medical specialty looks. Most psychiatrists guess. They make diagnoses like they did in 1840 when Lincoln was depressed. They talk to you, look for symptom clusters, and then they diagnose you and treat you. And I thought, well, that's sort of dumb. We should be looking. And so I went to this lecture. I got really excited because imaging plus psychiatry, it's what created a revolution in my life. So over the next 24 years, my colleagues in I at Amen Clinics have now built the world's largest database of brain scans related to behavior. So we've done 115,000 scans on patients from 111 countries. And people around the world, they have depression, they have bipolar disorder, they have ADD, schizophrenia, addiction, and so on. Now, the images just taught me so much. So here are two SPECT scans, healthy one on the left. So SPECT tells us three things: good activity, too little, or too much. So the image on the left, all you're looking at is this shape, and it's looking at blood flow, and we want it to be full, even, and symmetrical. The image on the right is showing us the really active areas in the brain, which are typically in the back, in an area called the cerebellum. So here's what two strokes look like. So you can see the difference, right? This isn't hard. So a stroke is where a blood vessel either breaks or clot goes and closes it off, and brain tissue dies. So obviously it's going to then have less blood flow. Alzheimer's disease, where the back half of the brain is deteriorating, traumatic brain injury. And one of the big early lessons I learned was that mild traumatic brain injury ruins people's lives, and nobody knows because they go to see psychiatrists that never look at their brain. And so the NFL actually formed its concussion committee in 1994, but they never sponsored a brain imaging study. So you have to ask yourself if they really wanted to know the answer to the question, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Drug addict brains just looked awful. The real reason not to use drugs, this includes marijuana. I hate to burst your bubble that you think it's good medicine. Seriously? Oh no, this is good for me. It lowers my reaction time, it demotivates me. I can't remember anything, but it's good for me. All right, so when I first started scanning people, I was the director of a psychiatric hospital unit that took care of drug addicts. And so I had all sorts of these scans, and they were so awful. I brought them home to my 4 children and effectively induced anxiety disorders in all 4 of them when it came to drug abuse. So this is what we see with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. See, the front part of the brain works so hard, you can't stop thinking. or this is somebody who has post-traumatic stress disorder. Their emotional brain works way too hard. Okay. So as I started doing imaging, I got really excited, and I thought of it this way. A picture is worth 1,000 words, but a map is worth 1,000 pictures. A map tells you where you are and gives you direction on how to get to where you want to go. And so we're doing these very cool maps, and what I got excited about is they changed people's lives. And the first person's life they changed was mine. So I got so excited about the technology, I just scanned everybody I knew. I scanned my mom, and it was so irritating because she had the most beautiful brain. So she was 60, and I'd done enough scans. It was the prettiest brain I'd ever seen. And I looked at her. I said, "Come here." I said, "You've ruined my life." And my mom's a very connected person. She got this little pouty face, and she says, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "You have a super normal brain? I thought all women would be like you, but you don't have a normal brain. So you ruined my life." And then I scanned myself, and that was my original scan, and it looked awful. It's like bumpy, and it's not healthy, and I'm actually someone who's never done drugs. I just thought that was really stupid. I mean, I like to be in some control of my life. And I don't smoke. But if you really know what I know now, I had bad brain habits. I didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night because I was busy, was chronically stressed, I overate. Diet soda was like my best friend. And it was just, when I saw my brain, I was horrified. That's where I developed the term brain envy, because I wanted mine to be like my mom's. And so through all the things I'm going to teach you, 20 years later, my brain looks healthier, bigger, fatter. And that's not what usually happens. Usually with age, our brain gets less and less and less active. I'll show you in a minute. The scans actually changed everything in my children's lives because, quite honestly, if you dated one of my kids for more than 4 months, I scammed you. Do you ever see Meet the Parents? This is worse. In fact, just this week, my son has a new girlfriend, like 5 months, and I'm like, you need to bring her by the clinic. I mean, I really like her. I think she's really great. And she had a great brain, thank God. Imaging changed everything in my own love life. I was married for 20 years, and it wasn't good. And so, 15 years ago, I got divorced. And, someone who grew up Catholic, that's a big deal, like a really big deal. And I'm like, if I ever fall in love again, I'm going to see their brain before any other intimate part. And so I met Tana, and she's a neurosurgical ICU nurse, and she loved my work. And I'm like, this is 2 weeks into our relationship. I'm like, what are you doing this afternoon? I said, you haven't been to the clinic. You want to see the clinic? So that's her in the camera. That was her brain. So I married her. So this is what happens to your brain over time. When I turned 60, it was a little weird, right? Because this is normal. And what I want to tell you is I don't want normal for you, because normal is sick. I am not interested in normal, and I can't imagine anyone associated with Jeff's company wants to be normal. You all want to be optimal. So this is typical, a typical 55-year-old brain. You see the wrinkles and holes, sort of like on your face, you have wrinkles and holes. And this is a typical 82-year-old brain. I mean, this looks awful. This is Doris Rapp, who's 82. You do not have to give in to aging. The health of your brain is much more about your habits and the nutrients you consume than your age. And now that I'm 61, I know I'm in a war. I know it. I see what gravity does to your face, and I've seen what it's done to tens of thousands of brains, and I don't want it, and I have a choice. You have a choice if you're smart. As a psychiatrist, the other really cool thing SPECT imaging did for me is it decreased stigma for my patients. They saw their problems now as medical and not moral, so there was less shame and guilt. And what I really loved is it increased forgiveness and compassion from their families. We had nothing else in psychiatry to do that. And the coolest thing, it completely changed the discussion around mental health for me. Quite frankly, no one wants to see a psychiatrist. So it's 1980, I tell my dad I'm going to be a psychiatrist. He gets mad at me. He said, why do you want to do that? You want to be a nut doctor? That's seriously what he said. Why do you want to do that? And quite frankly, no one wants to be labeled as abnormal, as defective, as crazy, but everybody wants a better brain. So what if mental health was really brain health? And that's my experience. If you get your brain right, you feel right, you act better, life is better. Okay, so I said all of that to get to this slide. This is the most exciting lesson I've learned from looking at 115,000 scans on people from all over the world, just like Jeff said. I love that, because when Jeff came, his brain wasn't as healthy as it should have been. And now it's better. But now he's a warrior to make it even better still. You are not stuck with the brain you have. You can make it better, and I can prove it. And I love that. So let's talk about the NFL just for a little bit. Football season started last night, and our announcer here is actually the voice of the Dallas Cowboys. I played football in high school. Well, I've loved football. But I began seeing, did you know your brain is really soft? About the consistency of soft butter? And your skull is really hard and it has multiple sharp bony ridges. And so I began seeing football players, high school players, college players, and then professional players, and nearly all of them had evidence of brain damage. And as I said, the NFL formed its concussion committee in 1994, but it never sponsored an imaging study. Instead, and I'm serious when I said this, they studied rats. They put little tiny helmets on rats. And they would whack them in the head repeatedly. And then they go, well, we just don't know if playing football causes long-term brain damage. The commissioner said that in front of Congress. And Maxine Waters, the congresswoman from Los Angeles, smacks him and says, Commissioner, acting like you are studying brain damage in football is a conflict of interest. It's like the tobacco companies saying they're studying lung cancer. So stop whining. In 2007, Anthony Davis came to my clinic. He's the Hall of Fame running back from USC. He played 8 years in the NFL. and his brain looked very damaged. And on the program I put him on, much like what I'm going to tell you, he got dramatically better. And Anthony is the sweetest, most outgoing person, and he wrote the commissioner a letter who didn't write back, but then he got me to speak at the Retired NFL Players Association. And I was horrified by what I saw. The level of depression, dementia, one player, and a player that I'd idolized growing up in LA, he was a Los Angeles Ram. He asked me the same question in the lecture 6 times. And I was just horrified. And I thought, somebody's got to do an imaging study. And then, of course, I have the voice in my head that said, well, why don't you do it? You have technology, you have experience. So we did it. So the problem with the NFL's position, and I'm dead serious when I say this, is if you don't admit you have a problem, you can't do anything to solve it. So, if you have a problem in your life or in your marriage or in your business, the first way to solve it is go, help, I have a problem. So brain damaged players were left without help or hope, and then everybody knows what's happened. We had players like Junior Seau, shoot themselves in the chest so they could donate their brain, or Dave Duerson, or it's just a nightmare. So we started and did the world's first and largest imaging study. The images changed everything. So here is our first published study on 100 players, and we said, hey, guess what, guys? There's global damage in football players' brains. But I'm a clinical psychiatrist, so I have great respect for researchers, but that's not my gig. My gig is changing people's lives. And so when we started our study, and I paid for this study, I went, uh-oh. We have to do a second arm of the study. Can we make these bad brains better? And so I put them on a program, the same one I'm going to tell you, which is brain envy, you got to care. You need to stop doing this. Smoking pot is not going green. One of my players actually said, well, I thought that was going green. Half of our players were obese. And so we actually had an NFL weight loss group where, they ended up losing thousands of pounds. It was really awesome. And we put them on nutrients, much like EHT. So here's an example. Duval Love was an offensive guard for the Rams for 12 years. He's morbidly obese. His brain looked awful, awful, awful. I'll show you the before and after in a little bit. So we published this study. 80% of our players show improvement. You are not stuck with the brain you have. You can make it better. Especially in memory, attention, mood, sleep, and blood flow to the brain. So here's Duval's brain, before and after. You are not stuck with the brain you have. You can make it better. You just have to be a warrior. You have to be serious about it. So this is me. I always felt like I was 4 years old standing next to these people. But look, he's 110 pounds lighter because he cares. And one of my favorite players, you'll recognize him, Freddie Dreyer, played for the Rams, who was on Hunter. He said, with the treatments, I'd replaced a part of me that had slipped away. Going through the program, I noticed mental energy and thinking speed that he had lost. He was not stuck with what he had. He made it better. So, the most exciting study that came out last year was from a friend of mine, Dale Bredesen from UCLA, where he took 10 people with Alzheimer's disease or mild cognitive impairment. Mild cognitive impairment means you're on your way to Alzheimer's disease. It's more than many senior moments. He put them on the program very much, almost exactly like I'm going to share with you, in 6 months. Now, these are people with mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's. People don't think of those people as getting better. In 6 months, 9 of the 10 were better. 6 of them went back to work. You are not stuck with the brain you have. So who wants to be a warrior? Anybody want to be a brain warrior? Do I have any brain warrior leaders here? Because that's what I'm interested in. People that will lead other people to brain health, because then everything else in their life is better. So how do you do it? Here's the answer. Here's the number if you haven't texted to get these awesome slides yet. If I can ask you another favor, my big book. So I wrote 30 books. It's a little weird. People ask me about that, and I go, it means two things. I'm very consistent, and I'm old. But my biggest book, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, that has sold just about 1 million copies, is coming out brand new. It's newly revised and coming out November 3rd. So I would dearly love for you to buy it for yourself and all your friends. And on the link, there's actually a link to it. All right, so that's enough time for the commercial. Let's do this. 4 simple things. Baseline brain health assessments. If you don't know, if you don't look, you don't know. I mean, it's as simple as that. When I turned 50, my doctor wanted me to have a colonoscopy. I asked him why he didn't want to look at my brain. Wasn't the other end of my body just as important? So in our clinics, we use SPECT, and I'm a huge believer. There are other ways to look at the brain. We also do a study called quantitative EEG. But, you know, my books are translated into 33 languages. So a long time ago, I realized not everyone can come and get a scan. If you can do that, that's the best. So we've actually developed online testing. We test your memory and mood and reaction time and attention and executive function and impulse control. So that would be the next way to do it. We have a wonderful community site called My Brain Fit Life where you can test your brain. So the first thing is testing. The second one is not normal. I don't want you ever to be normal. 51% of the US population at some point in their life will have a mental illness. That's normal. In fact, when my patients come, I tell everybody that. And I said, so you're normal, so let's get that out of the way. That normal is really nothing more than a setting on a dryer or a city in Illinois. Is anybody from Normal, Illinois? Anybody? I love you. I was there once. I went to the Normal grocery store. I was interviewed on the Normal radio station. And being from California, this is very important. I was finally able to meet normal women. So if you have suffered from an addiction, from ADD, from anxiety, from depression, OCD, bipolar disorder, welcome to normal. But I never want your labs to be normal. I want them to be optimal. But that means you have to get them. And I think on a yearly basis. So you need to know what your BMI is, or body mass index. That's your height against your weight. The study showed that people who were overweight, so they had a BMI between 25 and 30, had 4% less brain tissue, and their brains looked 8 years older than healthy people. For people who are obese, your body mass index was over 30. You had 8% less brain tissue, and your brain looked 16 years older than healthy people. So I don't want you to live with the lie, you know, everybody's overweight, it's okay, because it's not. Now, don't be too skinny, because their brains weren't great either, right? You want to be at a healthy weight. Fasting blood sugar, I can't tell you how important this is. I read a study just this week that said half of America is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. Oh my goodness, are you kidding me? So why is that a problem? Why is high blood sugar a problem? Because it damages blood vessels. It makes your blood vessels brittle and they're more likely to break, so you're more likely to be hypertensive, have heart disease, and have dementia. In fact, some people are calling Alzheimer's disease diabetes type 3. So you want to get your blood sugar under control, and you do it by avoiding the weapons of mass destruction that we talked about earlier. I'll talk more about that. So you need to know what it is. C-reactive protein is a measure of inflammation. Inflammation comes from the Latin word for fire, and when you have high C-reactive protein in your body, it's like you have a low-level fire destroying your organs. Vitamin D is just critical. It's actually really not a vitamin, it's a hormone. It's involved in your immune system, it's involved in depression, it's involved in dementia, it's involved in so many important things. And 2/3 of us, the same number of people who are overweight or obese, also have low vitamin D. And as your weight goes up, you cover up more, so you actually get less of the sun. And the damn dermatologists won. They made everybody afraid of the sun. You know, you were made or you were evolved in the sun, and with these low levels of vitamin D, it's damaging us. So you should know what your level is. And so when I first decided to get healthy, mine was 17. Normal's between 30 and 100. And I actually take 10,000 units a day, and so I maintain a level of about 80. I don't recommend that for you. I recommend you get it tested. And if it's really low, then take 2,000, retest it, and then you may and find the right level. Don't go crazy with it, because that can cause kidney stones. And then the last one is ferritin, which is a measure of iron stores. Too little iron, you get anemic and really, really tired. But too much is associated with heart disease, and it's like your body is rusting when you have too much iron. So it was really funny. I'm like, because at one point in my life I had too much iron, and I went, well, how do you get rid of it? Because we don't have a medicine for too much iron. You get bled. So you go donate blood. So I donated blood, and then the Red Cross thought, like, you know, I was their best friend for 5 years. And then I was in Istanbul last year, and outside of the spice market, I saw leeches for sale. And I'm like, that's so gross. And my wife is a neurosurgical ICU nurse, and she grabbed my arm. She said, honey, they do this for their health. They bloodlet themselves, and now you know why. And I looked at her and I said, I prefer donating blood. Thank you very much. Okay. This next piece is really important. And in Miriam's EHT product, it's not just EHT. And there's a reason for that. And when I went after our NFL group, we didn't do a single mechanism product. Your brain gets sick in multiple ways, so it will get better in multiple ways. So assessment, optimize your numbers, better in multiple ways. So for example, we use omega-3 fatty acids to decrease inflammation and improve your mood. I love ginkgo and vinpocetine because they increase blood flow and memory. Probiotics support gut health. We talked about that a little bit. B vitamins and phosphatidylserine for nutrient loading. Huperzine A, which is in Miriam's product, boosts acetylcholine. And EHT for tau protein and brain cell structure support. So as I've learned about EHT, I started taking it because I know with my NFL players, some of you may have heard of this thing called CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy, that their dementia is not at all like Alzheimer's disease. It's actually a tauopathy, or a problem with tau. So tau is the cellular structure. So it's the protein building block to keep your brain cells strong and the mechanisms inside the cell working. So EHT helps to support that. Funny, it comes from a coffee extract. Okay, another little commercial. This Wednesday, I am on the Dr. Oz show. So Dr. Oz actually came to Amen Clinics, New York, and we put a cap on his brain, on his head, and scanned him. We did a quantitative EEG on him. And then they were doing a whole show on good forms of energy and bad forms of energy. And so we studied smoking vaporized caffeine. And it's hysterical. So he's like puffing on this caffeine cigarette, and I'm scanning his brain. And it lowered the sleepy waves, so he's more alert. Buzzed, I think is the word he used. And his brain's more alert, but the judgment center in his brain went down. So you see a cute girl, you're more attentive, and now you make a bad decision, and now you're divorced and visiting your children. So I'm like, maybe not a good thing. But there's something good in coffee, because there's a lot of studies showing the health benefits of coffee. I would just kill the caffeine and then all of the bad things you put in it so that you can tolerate the nasty taste of coffee. Well, they've actually isolated EHT, which optimizes. Dr. Stock is going to talk about PP2A and how exciting that is. But it keeps your connection strong, supports memory, focus, energy, and your immune system. So it's very exciting. And the Nerium product actually has a number of other nutrients to work in this multiple mechanism approach that I talked about. Okay, step number 4. So number 1 is assess your brain. 2 is optimize, not normalize your brain, because normal is sick, in multiple mechanisms. And the last thing you need to do is know, reduce, and treat your risk for Alzheimer's disease. So I have seen many patients with Alzheimer's disease and many of their family who comes to me and they go, I know I'm at risk. How do I prevent it? You want to know the short answer? You prevent all the illnesses that are associated with it. And the fact is, virtually all of them are preventable. So you know you would see this one coming. Is anybody besides me bothered by all the pregnant men in our society? Deliver the baby. It's not good for you. This is not a good baby. Obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease all increase your risk. So how do you decrease your risk of these, or how do you treat these in the most effective way? It's diet and exercise. I hate to break it to you, but it really is what you eat. You can reverse type 2 diabetes in a short period of time if you become a brain warrior and you really watch what you put in your mouth. Low thyroid, low testosterone, low estrogen levels, you got to measure them. And, I work with a lot of people who have all 3 of these. And even for women, testosterone is critical because it helps you not only feel strong and sexual, but it also helps your mood and your memory. And then it came to me one day is, testosterone and estrogen drop fairly dramatically in both men, in women, in testosterone in men in their 50s. And I'm like, oh, I know why. That's the Earth's way of getting rid of people who've already had babies. I'm not okay with that. And I wouldn't hope you would be okay with that. And do you know the fastest way to ruin your testosterone level? Eat sugar or foods that turn to sugar. If you get a sugar burst, it drops your testosterone level by 25% nearly immediately. So if you're at the Cheesecake Factory and you share the cheesecake with your husband or your wife, odds are no one is getting dessert when they get home. Smoking. I was walking around the building yesterday when nobody recognized me, and I saw a lot of you smoking. Stop that. It's not good for you. Prematurely ages your brain. It is the #1 preventable cause of early death. Alcohol and drug abuse. Alcohol is not a health food. I don't know how else to say it. Oh, but Dr. Amen, I have to have 1 or 2 glasses of red wine a day. That's good for my heart. Yeah, but you have a smaller brain, according to studies from Johns Hopkins. And when it comes to your brain, size matters. So I like orchids. I just think they're really beautiful. And I'll often have them in my office. And when I'm dealing with an addict, I'll go, if the orchid's struggling because someone's poisoning it, what's the first thing you have to do to get it well? It's like you have to stop poisoning it, right? So if you're struggling with putting things in your body that damage it, it's the first thing to deal with. And I'm going to give you a secret that I give my patients. You have to eat good food consistently over time to break an addiction. Why? Because when blood sugar levels go low, blood flow to your frontal lobes go low and you make more bad decisions. You also have to focus on sleep. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But if you get less than 7 hours of sleep at night, you're more likely to relapse because brain activity in your frontal lobe goes down. So sleep and diet are critical to breaking an addiction. Sleep apnea. This is so important. And I know a lot of you have actually been diagnosed with it. And some of you hard-headed men, you try the mask for 3 nights. I can't get used to it. And you just throw it off. And you're living with sleep apnea, which triples your risk for Alzheimer's disease. Your brain is the most metabolically active organ, I think, in the universe. It just uses a lot of oxygen and a lot of calories. So anything that deprives it of oxygen damages it. And if you snore loudly, if you stop breathing at night, if you're chronically tired during the day, you should go to a sleep lab and get a study. How do you know unless you look? You can't change what you don't measure. It's really critical. So this is a scan of one of my patients with sleep apnea. Looks like they have early Alzheimer's disease. Insomnia. So brand new research, really exciting research that shows we didn't know really why you slept, and now we do. Your brain has a special cleaning crew that only activates at night when you sleep. So during the day, your brain is so busy making decisions, the cleaning crew is pretty much off. But when you sleep, it goes and cleans up the toxic mess that builds up during the day, including the plaques thought to be responsible for Alzheimer's disease. So if you're not sleeping well, gunk builds up, and then you get brain fog, memory problems, depression, and so on. It's this fascinating study on warriors, since we're talking about warriors. Warriors who got 7 hours of sleep at night were 98% accurate on the range. Those who only got 6 hours were 50%. Look at that difference. So imagine if your kids aren't sleeping, they're not going to be learning well. My daughter just started 7th grade, and it's one of the big discussions she and I had is, sweetie, if you turn off everything and you get to bed, and for her, because, growth hormone works the best when you're asleep and she's still growing, growth hormone works better, your brain is cleaner. So one night she actually came to her mother. She said, I'm going to bed early, Mom. I need to wash my brain. And her mother came into my office and she said, what are you telling Chloe? For those that got 5 hours of sleep, they're only 28% accurate on the range. 4 hours were 15% accurate. They were dangerous. Excessive stress, and I've already talked to some of my new friends who are chronically stressed because of how fast Nerium is growing, and you have to take time, and maybe it's 15 minutes or half an hour. to work out, to meditate, to do the right things. But excessive stress has been found to actually kill cells in the memory centers of your brain. So I love meditation, relaxation, hypnosis, CDs, and maybe you can convince Jeff that I'll create some of those for you. Untreated ADD or ADHD is one of my specialties. There's a lot of misinformation about it. It's real, and when left untreated, it ruins people's lives. The hallmark symptoms: short attention span, easily distracted, disorganized, procrastinate, and impulsive. And there's a higher incidence of people who have it, who get divorced, who file for bankruptcy, who go to jail, who lose their jobs. And if you have these symptoms, and not every once in a while, because all of us have them every once in a while, but they've been sort of the story of your life, and your teacher said, he's really smart, but only if he tried harder, or she should not talk so much, that it's really worth getting it assessed and treated. And as far as I know, I think we're the best place in the world to do that. If you exercise less than twice a week, you have an increased risk. Interesting. So how could you immediately eliminate that risk? Anybody have a thought? Exercise more than twice a week? I mean, if you just look at all of these, the prevention plans are really clear. You do not want to be a couch potato. So I have this great story. This is Garrett Helwig. He's one of our really awesome psychiatrists. And he's a warrior. I mean, he takes brain health really seriously, works out, he's strong. And then, maybe it's his ADD, went to Hawaii. He jumped into a pool in Hawaii that was infected with a specific bug called leptospirosis and nearly died. He was unconscious. Like 70% of people who get this nearly die. Not nearly die, they're dead, like gone forever. But because he was strong, he was able to get out of the hospital and do what he loves. So I know I went after obesity. I also want to go after frailty. You never want to be frail. The thing, Santana, who is a neurosurgical ICU nurse, said the thing that kills people is frailty. If he would have went into the hospital frail, or even normal, he would not have come out alive. So from an exercise standpoint, I think it's really simple. You should lift weights twice a week. I'm not kidding. You're a girl, you should lift weights. The stronger you are as you age, the less likely you are to get Alzheimer's disease. Muscle burns fat, it increases metabolism. I'm a huge fan, just don't use steroids to get that way. And then walk like you're late 45 minutes, 4 to 5 times a week. So keep it simple. I'm not like a marathon person. Maybe it's because I'm lazy naturally. But it's like way too much stress. Walk like you're late 45 minutes, 4 to 5 times a week. Lift weights twice a week for a half an hour. No new learning and being addicted to gadgets increases your risk for dementia. There's actually a study from Hewlett-Packard showed if you're addicted to your cell phone, over a year you lose 9 IQ points. About the same as if you're smoking pot. And if you're addicted to your gadgets and smoking pot, it's really bad. So new learning is critical to keeping your brain strong. So word games. All right, so let me just say this clear. Just doing crossword puzzles is like going to the gym, doing right bicep curls, and then leaving. You got to work out your whole body, and you have to work out your whole brain. So word games work out the left front language part of the brain, laughter, the right side of your brain, learning a musical instrument, your temporal lobes, and new dance steps or table tennis works out the cerebellum, that busy, active part of your brain. But if you drink when you dance, or play beer pong. That ruins any benefit. The standard American diet is associated with diabetes, cancer, depression, and dementia. So if you're looking at that going, yum, you're not a brain warrior yet. Or maybe you're a brain warrior white belt that just doesn't know quite enough. So here's the short course on healthy nutrition. Calorie smart, so you're not overweight. Whole, fresh, real food filled with colorful vegetables with protein and healthy fat at every meal. Why? Because that'll decrease your appetite. Fat is not the enemy. Sugar is. All right. So people who have a healthy fat-based diet, listen to this. It's crazy. They have 42% less risk of getting Alzheimer's disease. So think of fish, healthy oils, nuts, seeds, avocados. People who have a protein-based diet, 21% less risk of getting Alzheimer's disease. But people who have a carbohydrate-based diet, think bread, pasta, potatoes, rice, fruit juice, and sugar, have a 400% increased risk. Now, if you're smart, you're going to take what I just said, connect it to diabetes and how diabetes causes type 3. And if you get rid of all of those foods, your blood sugar is going to become much more stable and you'll be much less likely to be diagnosed with diabetes. If you had $1 million racehorse, would you ever feed it junk food? Only if you were an idiot. Only if you wanted to lose every race you entered. But aren't you worth so much more? Age is the biggest risk factor. That's when I turned 60, I'm like, dude, you better be serious because it's coming for you. My dad, who I adore, he was not an easy dad, but I still adored him. And he would never listen to me. And I don't want you to be like him. Last year, he started having a pretty serious health crisis. He had a heart arrhythmia, and they were having trouble getting it under control. And he still wouldn't listen to me. And then finally one day, he got sick of being sick. And he went, what do you want me to do? And he just did everything. It was incredible. And he lost 30 pounds. And his heart stabilized. And now I work out with him twice a week. And we get on the floor and we see who can do a plank longer. And I'm so excited. And he said, but I never thought it would happen to me. And I'm like, what a stupid thing to say. If you have that thought, that's stupid. That is not the sign of a healthy brain because that train is coming for you. Do you want to get off the tracks or do you want to stay and just sort of take your chance? And what's the chance? 50% of you will be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease by the time you're 85. I don't know about you, I'm off the tracks. So, you want to prevent Alzheimer's disease, you have to prevent all the illnesses that are associated with it. So, in the last few minutes, let me just tell you some of my favorite stories. So this is Andy. He came to see me from the University of Michigan where I gave a talk on ADD. He brought his daughter, and so she wouldn't feel singled out. He got scanned, and you can notice he's pregnant. Oh. And his brain looked awful. And I'm like, Andy, how much are you drinking? And he said, not much. And I've been a psychiatrist a long time, and I realized I had to ask the follow-up question. What does that mean? Well, 1 or 2 when I get home from work, and 1 or 2 with dinner, and 1 before bed every night. He said, yeah, but it's not a problem. I'm looking at his scan, I'm like, it's a problem. And he had brain envy. And 10 years later, he delivered the baby. It was a long delivery. and his brain aged backwards. And this is Rob, whose wife and I did work together, and she translated some of my work. And so he would just come and watch the PBS specials that I did. And he's like, oh, this guy just makes so much sense. And in a matter of 4 months, completely transformed his body. And his wife was so happy. And he was remembering things that he said he was sharper mentally than ever before. And this is Mary Ann, who's the Western Regional Director for Franklin Covey. And she felt awful. And at 59, she said, you know, I think maybe my life is just done. Pain, depression, and became a warrior. She read one of my books, became a warrior. And this was her a year later. And she said, for my 60th birthday, I gave myself the present of a fast-acting brain with the wisdom of age. I love that. And then, so who wants to be a warrior? Care, stop, do. I mean, it's really that simple. You have to care, stop doing anything that hurts yourself, do things that help yourself. So one of my favorite warrior stories is Steve. Steve Arterburn is a best-selling author. He's a leader in the Christian community. He writes me this crazy email. My rental confirmation number for Aruba, and he lists it, and my hotel number. And I'm reading this going, what is this about? The reason I know this is that I'm supernaturally able to remember things that I would have never even tried before. And they don't go away. My productivity and creativity is off the charts. I'm able to connect with my wife in ways I've never experienced. This is what I'm doing. He exercises in bursts versus 30 minutes of running. No sodas, where he used to have 4 a day. Restricted grains and simple carbs. Brain-directed supplements. He wears a CPAP. He's one of the dumb ones that I talked about who'd been diagnosed with sleep apnea but didn't wear it. Does the Brain Fit Life. So when you test your brain on Brain Fit Life, we'll actually give you games targeted to your vulnerable areas. And my favorite part, of course, my wife would say this, and the sexual intimacy is another area of peak performance. So I love that. And just a couple of weeks ago, Nancy comes to my clinic, and my assistant, she wasn't seeing me, she was seeing one of the other doctors, says, Dr. Amen, you have to meet Nancy. And I don't know, I had like 14 things on my schedule. And I just look at her with this dumb look. And she's like, stop it. You have to meet her. She's 83. She came here from Oxford, England. And so I went in and talked to her. And she's a warrior. She picked up Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, a used bookstore for 50 cents. And she said, I just started doing everything you said. And it started with drinking water. Your brain's 80% water. So she lost 5 stones. I'm like, what's that? 73 pounds in a year. And she makes that face. She said, I used to be like this. It's so funny. So her energy's better, mood's better. She's off the couch. She drinks water. She walks. Nutrition, supplements, new learning. And then she changed her family. That's what brain warrior leaders do. They change their family. So, are you a sheep or a sheepdog? Sheep go with the herd. They live in denial. They don't want to see problems. They pretend all is okay and the wolf will never come. Sheep, in fact, don't like sheepdogs because they remind them that trouble may be near. Sheepdogs have fangs and they're serious, sort of like me. But sheepdogs love their sheep even when the love is not returned. And they give their lives for the flock. So who are you? Are you a sheep in denial or a sheepdog guarding your flock? So Laura is a sheepdog. She actually works for the Salvation Army. She completely changed her life, her family, and then changed the lives of people in the drug treatment program that she directed. These are the people. And Thomas, who said, he graduated from our program, "My life was a mess, now it is a message." I have been tested, now I have a testimony. I was a victim, now I am victorious. I went through trials, now I am triumphant. Okay, last thing. Write it down. You need to know why you want to do this. Why do you want to be a brain warrior? Why do you care? Because if you don't know, this will only have been some of the best 90 minutes of your life, but you'll never do anything with it. I'm going to tell you my why. My why is Emmy. I have 4 grandbabies. I adore them all. But Emmy was born sick. She was born floppy. She had no muscle tone. And at 5 months old, she started to have wicked seizures. In fact, one day, she had 160 of them. I was lecturing in Boston when my daughter Brianne texted me a video of her looking like she was being electrocuted. I was horrified. I got on the phone. She went to the emergency room. I got on the phone with the doctor. She was diagnosed with something called West syndrome. 30% of these kids die before the age of 3. Many of them never walk. They're developmentally delayed. And the doctor wanted to put her on a medicine that was $26,000 a dose. And I'm like, what about the ketogenic diet? And he's like, oh, there's no science behind that. And I'm like, my wife said she knew the conversation went south when I asked him if he knew how to read. I'm like, you're kidding, right? I said, there's 70 studies on it. Most of them are from Johns Hopkins. You know, this little place in Baltimore? You've heard of Johns Hopkins? He's like, oh, if you want to do that, I won't be your doctor. I said, are you kidding? You're fired. You must have failed medical school. Your job isn't to tell us what to do, it's to give us options. We need options. And anyways, on the ketogenic diet, this is Emmy walking to preschool. I know why I have to be healthy. I know why I have to be healthy. If I'm healthy, this little girl will have a better life because I'm her sheepdog. Who needs you? Who needs you to have a strong mind and a healthy brain? Who needs you? Because if you don't get into who needs you, then the fast food companies will win. The alcohol companies will win. The gadget companies, the news companies who fill your mind with crap will win. So, who wants to be a sheepdog? Who wants to be a brain warrior? Thank you so much.
Bam! That's the best one.